Welcome, everyone. We'll get started now. This is REL Central's webinar, Delivering Work-Based Learning in Rural Schools, Opportunities and Options. My name is Douglas Gagnon. I'm a senior researcher at Marzano Research, where we host the REL Central contract, and I'll be facilitating this webinar along with my colleague Doug Van Dyne, who's also a senior researcher here. At this point, I'll just share a little bit of background and how this webinar came about. So as I mentioned, this is being hosted by REL Central. We're one of 10 regional education laboratories around the country that are funded by U.S. Department of Education's Institute for Education Sciences. So we work in a 7-state region that includes Wyoming, Colorado, North and South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri. And within this region, we provide technical support, conduct applied research, and disseminate research as necessary. And within REL Central, we host the Rural Education Research Alliance. We can go to the next slide. So this is one of a number of research alliances at REL Central. And essentially, it's a group of projects across the region that's shared by, that is united by the shared goal of trying to address challenges in rural schools. And traditionally in the Rural Education Research Alliance, we focused on the areas of teacher recruitment and retention and looking at opportunity gaps. Although speaking with stakeholders throughout our region, it became clear that work-based learning was an area of interest and something that people wanted to learn more about. So it was partly through conversations with our regional partners in this alliance that this came about. And I know that we have a couple members from the Alliance participating today, so welcome to them as well. So on with an overview of what's in store today, we'll start with introducing our presenters. From there, we'll discuss basically what is work-based learning when it's being implemented, so what are some of the delivery challenges with doing so, particularly in rural areas. We'll introduce some frameworks that can be helpful when implementing work-based learning. And then we'll hear from a couple presenters that are on the ground implementing work-based learning, and they'll share their experiences with it. So with that, we will go to introductions. Our first presenter is going to be Steve Klein. Next slide. Steve Klein is the director for the Center for School, Family, and Community. And Steve really brings a wealth of experience in the career and technical education and workforce readiness field in general. We'll also have Neil Wolf. Neil Wolf is an agriculture instructor at Grand River Technical School in Missouri. So he will share his experiences there, as will Sarah Bird, who is curriculum instruction and assessment director at Boone Central Schools in Nebraska. And again, myself and Doug Van Dyne are facilitating this webinar. So with that, I will turn things over to Steve Klein. Take it away, Steve.
Great, thanks very much. Hello, everyone. I wanted to share with you a quick story that gives a sense of how work-based learning can, when it's not done well, can manifest, and then take you through the framework for how it can be. So many years ago, that would be about 3, my oldest son, who at the time was a junior, was working at a climbing gym in our area. After school, it wasn't connected to any of the school curriculum. And basically, he was a junior working with, it's a climbing gym, so these are college students and students who were or people who were taking some time in between. So he was the youngest one there. Well, he went to the holiday party. And, you know, it was about 11 o'clock, it was a school night, and he wasn't back. And so I texted him and said, you know, when are you coming home? Oh, soon, you know, 11:30, nothing, wait, when you come out? Soon. 11:45, well, we're trying to get a ride. Well, you know, at about close to 1 in the morning, he finally showed up, and my wife walked down to meet him at the front door. And she came back and he said, well, Hallie, and I said, what's up? She said, he seems a little unfocused, but and I kind of smell alcohol, but, you know, I sent him to bed. Well, the next morning I'm at work, and at 9 in the morning I get a text from my wife that says, so we have a very sad and repentant child this morning, and a word to the wise. don't throw up in a wire wastebasket. So I came home from work, and he's stretched out on the sofa. We made him go to school, and he was hard to see because it was a green sofa. And I said, what happened? And he said, well, they started serving this drink, and it was called the White Russian. It was really good, so I had 10 of them. So we had a conversation about what it means to be working and what it means to be working with people older than one. And we also talked a little bit about the job. And what he really learned from this whole experience was he never wanted to ever clean another toilet again, and he was never going to drink. Now, that's probably a lot to ask from a kid, but we were happy to hear the latter part at least. So he experienced a work-based learning that was not connected to school and wasn't very structured. And it didn't really work out all that well. So what is work-based learning? Well, what you see on the screen right now is the federal definition for what constitutes work-based learning. It's from the Perkins legislation. And I think simply put, what it's saying is we learn by doing. That having an opportunity to be out in the field and seeing and experiencing is a great way to learn, and that context matters. How the instruction is delivered and how those interactions occur are really important. It's not just about putting someone out in the field and saying, go do. So what is kind of nice here, you see on the screen, is some of the research behind work-based learning. And I kind of read is that it supports what's probably pretty much common sense to most of us, that students who participate in work-based learning are more likely to be prepared for the workforce entry and to be more engaged in school. And you can see these references you'll be able to download those afterwards if you'd like with the slides. But they really lay out, in terms of the first bullet, some of the outcomes that have been identified, with the idea that work-based learning prepares students for the workforce. That it also allows them to be a little more motivated both at the work site, but also in school, more increased attendance and lower dropout rates. Now, there's a lot more out there, but I think that really these examples are some of what the research says is behind work-based learning, why we should do it. But the second bullet is really more about the intentionality behind it, that there needs to be a structure to the way that the programs are offered, that the curriculum needs to be integrated in, right? The work-based curriculum has to be integrated in with the classroom curriculum. There has to be a purpose behind this. And it should be connected to the real world. It should be authentic. So essentially, in terms of that structure, I guess one of the things I think that is really important, and if you don't leave this call with anything else, it's that work-based learning isn't dichotomous. It's not a yes/no checkbox, you did it. If it's going to be authentic and if it's going to have meaning, then there should be a holistic approach to work-based learning. Now, I don't think there's any one right way of doing it, but on your screen you can see a continuum of work-based learning options. It was put together by colleagues at FHI 360 and Connect Ed, and it lays out the ways that the strategies that work-based learning can be offered. You can see that one of the interesting pieces here is that it can be offered in any grade. And those grades are approximations, but essentially it should be progressive. It's an experience that starts with career awareness, where students learn what is work? What does it even mean to be working? Career exploration, where students begin then to look at the different types of careers that are out there, and that's often in the middle grades. And with Perkins reauthorization in Perkins 5, it is now expanded. Funding can be used in grades 5 to 8. Career preparation, what we tend to think of as the actual game